Imagine a world of gilded cages and whispered secrets, where every queen's breath was watched and every desire could spark a scandal. In royal courts, the throne was often a prison, and when hearts defied crowns, especially with men of lower rank, the consequences were catastrophic. Such affairs threatened dynasties, shook kingdoms, and often ended in blood. Tonight, we pull back the velvet curtain on history's most sensational royal betrayals, queens who risked everything for forbidden passion and paid the ultimate price. Number 10. We uncover the chilling tale of Queen Blanche of Burgundy, whose life was forever shattered by the infamous Tour de Nesle affair. In the early 14th century, Blanche, the young and beautiful daughter-in-law of King Philip IV of France, became embroiled in a scandal that shook the very foundations of medieval royalty. Her alleged lover was Walter of Aunet, a Norman knight serving as an equerry to her brother-in-law Charles of Valois. The affair came to light in 1314 when Queen Isabella of England, Blanche's sister-in-law, noticed that gifts he had given, embroidered purses, were in the possession of the Aunet brothers. What seemed like a trivial detail soon exploded into a full-blown royal investigation. Spies were ordered to follow the queens, and soon the shocking truth was revealed. Clandestine liaisons were taking place inside the ancient Tour de Nesle Tower in Paris, a location that would become synonymous with betrayal and disgrace. Once the charges were proven, Blanche's fate was sealed. Dragged before the Paris Parliament, she was humiliated, her head was shaved, and she was condemned to spend the rest of her life imprisoned in confinement. Her lover Walter endured far worse. After brutal torture and forced confessions, he was convicted of lèse-majesté, treason against the sovereign. His public execution was horrifyingly savage. Castration, dismemberment, flaying, and hanging, all carried out to reinforce the untouchable sanctity of royal bloodlines. Blanche's downfall did more than ruin her life. It sent shockwaves through the French monarchy, undermined dynastic stability, and even contributed to the crises that would eventually fuel the 100 Years' War. Her story is a grim reminder that in the medieval courts of Europe, the personal sins of queens could unleash devastating political storms, and any liaison with a servant could become a deadly act of treason. At number 9. We turn to Queen Margaret of Burgundy, another victim of the explosive Tour de Nesle scandal that erupted in the heart of France. Margaret, the spirited wife of Louis X of France, stood accused of committing adultery with Philip of Aunet, brother of Walter, and a court equerry of high trust. Much like her sister-in-law Blanche, Margaret was drawn into dangerous secret encounters that soon became the subject of suspicion. It was Isabella of England, ever observant and politically shrewd, who first raised the alarm, noting peculiar inconsistencies that tied the queens to the Aunet brothers. For Margaret, this was not only an accusation, but also a reflection of a troubled marriage. Louis VII was known for neglecting her, spending more time on sports and courtly amusements than on his wife, which may have driven Margaret to seek affection elsewhere. But in medieval Europe, the queen's private choices were never truly private. Once the allegations reached the king, the matter was handled with brutal severity. Margaret's head was forcibly shaved, her dignity stripped away, and she was condemned to lifelong imprisonment. Philip of Aunet was executed in a manner so brutal that chroniclers described it as one of the most savage spectacles of royal justice. The scandal deeply shook King Philip IV, father-in-law to both queens, and some historians suggest that the stress of the revelations hastened his death later in 1314. Beyond the personal tragedies, Margaret's disgrace carried monumental political consequences. The Queen's imprisonment prevented them from producing heirs, leaving gaps in the French succession and intensifying disputes that spiraled into the 100 Years' War. Her tale illustrates how a queen's alleged intimacy with a servant was never a mere scandal, but a destabilizing event that can fracture dynasties and alter the course of European history. At number 8, the spotlight shifts to Queen Carolina Mathilde of Denmark and Norway, whose tragic romance with a royal physician ended in scandal and destruction. Born a British princess, Caroline Mathilde entered a doomed marriage with King Christian VII, a monarch plagued by severe mental illness and instability. Lonely and isolated in a foreign court, the young queen's vulnerability opened the door for the ambitious Johann Friedrich Struensee. The king's German doctor, initially brought to treat Christian's condition, Struensee quickly gained the king's trust, and through that, access to the queen. What began as a secret companionship soon blossomed into a passionate affair. Caroline Mathilde found in Struensee not only love but also a partner in political ambition. Backed by the Queen, Struensee rose to power, introducing sweeping reforms aimed at modernizing Denmark, abolishing torture, improving education, and curbing noble privileges. However, this alliance of love and politics soon sparked resentment among the aristocracy. To the nobles, the sight of a queen sharing intimacy with a physician, a mere servant in their eyes, was an unforgivable insult to the dignity of monarchy. Worse, Struensee's radical reforms threatened their power and wealth. Enemies at court, led by Queen Dowager Juliana Maria, plotted their downfall. In 1772, their plan succeeded. Struensee was arrested, tried, and executed in a gruesome public spectacle. Caroline Maffeldt was stripped of her titles, divorced, and exiled to the German town of Celle, where she died in isolation at just 23 years old. Her story captures the perilous intersection of personal desire and political reform, showing how a queen's affair with a servant could destabilize an entire kingdom. What makes Caroline Mathilde's tragedy so striking is that her passion was not just a personal scandal. It reshaped the political landscape of Denmark, proving once again that when love and power collide in royal courts, the consequences can be deadly. At number 7, we encounter the tragic and electrifying tale of Mary, Queen of Scots, whose rumored intimacy with her private secretary, David Rizzio, shook Scotland to its core. In the stormy 16th century, Mary's life was already a dangerous balancing act of politics, religion, and marriage. Into this fragile world stepped Rizzio, a low-born Italian who first entered court as a musician before rising swiftly to the Queen's closest circle. His charm, intelligence, and loyalty made him indispensable to Mary, but his rapid ascent fueled resentment among Scotland's powerful lords. More dangerously, Mary's husband, Lord Darnley, grew consumed with jealousy, as whispers of an affair between Queen and secretary swirled across the realm. When Mary became pregnant, suspicion reached a boiling point. Darnley publicly questioned whether the child she carried, the future James VI of Scotland, was even his. In March 1566, the crisis exploded in bloodshed. Darnley and the nobles stormed into Holyrood Palace, dragging Rizzio from the Queen's side while she pleaded for his life. In front of Mary, they stabbed him more than 50 times, his screams echoing through the royal chambers. The brutal murder devastated Mary emotionally and politically, fracturing her marriage and undermining her rule. Rizzio's low birth and foreign origins made him an easy target for nobles who believed he had usurped power that belonged to them. His gruesome death was not simply an act of jealous rage, but a violent reassertion of aristocratic dominance against a servant who had risen too high. For Mary, the loss was catastrophic. Her weakened position paved the way for her forced abdication, her long imprisonment by Elizabeth I of England, and ultimately her execution. The scandal of her relationship with Rizzio illustrates how, in the volatile world of royal politics, a queen's rumored intimacy with a servant could ignite jealousy, class hatred, and ultimately alter the fate of nations. At number 6, the spotlight falls on the infamous Marguerite de Valois, better remembered as Queen Margot of Navarre, whose life was a whirlwind of forbidden passions and relentless scandal. Born into France's powerful Valois dynasty, Margot was married to Henry of Navarre, later King Henry IV of France, in a political union meant to secure peace between Catholics and Protestants. Yet Margot had little interest in being bound by convention. Almost immediately, she embarked on a series of affairs that spanned every stratum of society. Her lovers included noblemen, soldiers, singers, carpenters' sons, shepherds, servants, and even a wandering minstrel. This queen lived dangerously, embracing love as both pleasure and rebellion, but such affairs were fraught with peril. One of her lovers, the son of an apothecary who tenderly cared for her during illness, was brutally stabbed to death by her jealous bodyguard right in her bedroom. Another companion, a French army captain, was discovered hiding inside her chimney and executed in her presence. His death a chilling reminder of how fragile a servant's intimacy with a queen could be. Even in her later years, Margot refused to conform, taking much younger lovers, including Julian d'Ath, whose tragic end came when the jealous Comte de Vermond killed him at her doorstep. Despite these repeated scandals, Margot managed to survive with her wealth, wit, and influence intact. After her divorce, she became one of the wealthiest women in France, using her intelligence and charisma to maintain relevance at court. Margot's story reveals a unique dimension of queenship. Unlike others who were destroyed by their passions, she turned her scandalous reputation into power, defying the very idea that queens had to be silent victims. Her life shows how a woman, even in an unforgiving royal system, could bend the rules, claim agency, and navigate survival amidst deadly passions. At number 5, we uncover the daring and secretive love story of Queen Catherine of Valois, the French-born widow of King Henry V of England. Left a young widow after Henry's untimely death, Catherine's future was supposed to be one of solitude and ceremonial dignity, with her role reduced to that of a queen dowager bound by rigid royal restrictions. Yet, loneliness and human desire overcame custom when she fell deeply in love with Owen Tudor, a Welsh courtier and clerk of the royal wardrobe. Although Owen was of respectable character, he was still a commoner, and his love affair with Catherine defied every royal law of the time. Their union remained hidden for years, producing several children in secret. Among them were Edmund and Jasper Tudor, who would later play critical roles in the Wars of the Roses, altering English history forever. Once their relationship was discovered, Catherine faced harsh repercussions, banished to a nunnery where she lived out her final years before dying young. Owen was captured, imprisoned, and nearly executed for daring to love a queen. Yet, their forbidden romance had astonishing long-term consequences. Their grandson, Henry Tudor, would one day seize the throne as King Henry VII, founding the powerful Tudor dynasty that ruled England for over a century, giving the world iconic monarchs like Henry VIII and Elizabeth I. What began as a dangerous scandal, an affair between a widowed queen and her servant, ultimately became the foundation of one of the most famous royal houses in history. Catherine's story demonstrates how forbidden love, even punished harshly in its own time, can ripple through generations to reshape the destiny of an entire nation. In her case, the servant's bloodline became England's crown, proving that sometimes scandal creates dynasties. At number 4, we step into the explosive 19th century scandal of Queen Caroline of Brunswick, the estranged and defiant wife of King George IV. From the very beginning, their marriage was a catastrophe, marked by disgust, open infidelity, and a mutual desire to escape each other. When the couple separated, Caroline chose to live abroad, and it was during her travels that she formed a notorious and intimate bond with Bartolomeo Pergami, a low-born Italian servant she first hired as a courier. Pergami's rise within her household was meteoric. From servant to chamberlain and eventually head of staff, his newfound power and proximity to the queen only fueled gossip. The scandal grew bolder as their intimacy became undeniable. They openly dined together, were spotted sharing a bed on voyages, and even bathed together in plain sight of servants. Earlier whispers had already accused Caroline of bearing an illegitimate child by a footman, but her attachment to Pergami provided scandalous proof to her enemies. When George IV finally ascended the throne, he launched a ruthless campaign to humiliate and discard her, bringing forward the infamous Queen's Case in Parliament, essentially a public trial for adultery. Witnesses testified to her brazen relationship with Pergami, but Caroline's legal team countered with desperate claims about Pergami's supposed impotence. In the end, the evidence mattered less than the public's reaction. The people of Britain despised George IV for his extravagance and cruelty, while they adored Caroline, viewing her as a wronged woman battling an arrogant tyrant. Crowds rallied in her defense, transforming her private scandal into a national cause. The divorce bill was withdrawn, not because she was found innocent, but because her popularity made condemning her politically dangerous. Caroline's defiance and the people's loyalty made her a symbol of popular resistance against an unpopular monarchy. Her story demonstrates how, by the 19th century, public opinion was becoming a force capable of restraining royal authority, a precursor to the democratic pressures that would define modern politics. Her scandal was more than a marital dispute. It was a test of monarchy versus public will. And for once, the people won. At number 3, we encounter the most enigmatic and enduring royal rumor of all: the whispered love life of Queen Victoria, Britain's longest reigning monarch of the 19th century. After the devastating death of her husband, Prince Albert, Victoria plunged into mourning and withdrew from public life. Yet in her grief, she found solace in the companionship of John Brown, her blunt Scottish gillie and personal servant. What began as loyalty soon evolved into an inseparable bond. Brown attended her constantly, handled her correspondence, escorted her on rides, and even stood guard outside her chambers, unafraid to defy courtiers and nobles. His informal manner and sheer closeness to the Queen scandalized the establishment, earning him the mocking nickname the Queen's Stallion. Gossip at court suggested that their companionship crossed into intimacy, with even a priest later claiming he had secretly married them. Victoria's flirtations with Brown were noted, and anecdotes of his irreverence, such as lifting his kilt in jest, only fanned the flames. The scandal deepened further when whispers of a second servant turned favorite, Abdul Karim, her Indian attendant, echoed the same dynamic years later. But unlike other queens ruined by such rumors, Victoria's immense authority shielded her, at least publicly. After her death in 1901, however, her son Edward VII moved swiftly to obliterate all traces of the truth. He destroyed letters, burned diaries, smashed statues of Browne, and censored anything that hinted at impropriety, in a desperate bid to preserve the monarchy's image. Yet, he could not erase everything. Victoria herself ensured her secret endured. She requested to be buried with Browne's mother's wedding ring on her finger and one of his handkerchiefs hidden in her coffin. A photograph of Browne was also secretly placed in her hand before burial. These intimate gestures provide tantalizing evidence of a bond deeper than mere friendship. The Victorian monarchy may have tried to erase the affair, but love leaves traces even kings cannot destroy. This mystery reveals the eternal tension between monarchy as an institution and monarchs as human beings, reminding us that even the most powerful queen of her age may have sought forbidden comfort in the arms of her servant. At number 2, we revisit the tragic fate of Queen Catherine Howard, the youthful fifth wife of King Henry VIII, remembered as the rose without a thorn, until her past and present indiscretions sealed her doom. Unlike the king's earlier wives, Catherine was very young and inexperienced in courtly politics when she became queen in 1540. Unbeknownst to Henry, her past was already shadowed by scandal. As a teenager, she had engaged in romantic entanglements with Henry Mannix, her music teacher, and later with Francis Derham, a gentleman serving her grandmother. With Derham, Catherine reportedly exchanged vows of affection, addressing one another as husband and wife, a claim that would later haunt her as evidence of pre-contract and moral corruption. Foolishly, after her elevation to queenship, Catherine appointed both men to positions within her household, a decision that gave them proximity and opportunity to boast of their past intimacy. This recklessness set the stage for catastrophe. During her queenship, Catherine began yet another ill-fated affair with Thomas Culpeper, a dashing gentleman of the king's privy chamber. Facilitated by her confidant, Lady Rochford, the secret meetings and love letters between Catherine and Culpeper provided damning proof of her betrayal. When the scandal came to light, Derham and Culpeper were arrested, interrogated, and condemned. Derham was executed in brutal fashion, drawn, quartered, and displayed, while Culpeper suffered the axe of the executioner, his head placed on London Bridge as a warning. Catherine herself was stripped of her crown, branded a traitor, and executed at the Tower of London in February 1542, barely 18 months after her wedding to Henry. Her story is a stark reminder of the precarious tightrope queens walked in Tudor England, where lover folly could be construed as treason. Catherine's youth and naivety highlight how little autonomy women truly possessed in a patriarchal monarchy. Her pursuit of affection was framed not as human weakness, but as betrayal of the crown. Her downfall became another bloody chapter in Henry VIII's reign, underscoring the lethal intersection of power, passion, and politics at the Tudor court. At number 1, we arrive at the most infamous royal scandal of all time, the downfall of Anne Boleyn, the dazzling second wife of King Henry VIII, whose execution in 1536 remains one of history's most dramatic spectacles. Anne's rise had been meteoric. She captivated Henry with her wit, charm, and ambition, inspiring him to break with the Catholic Church and ignite the English Reformation in order to marry her. Yet, just 3 years into her queenship, Anne fell from favor, unable to provide the king with a surviving male heir. To rid himself of her and clear the way for Jane Seymour, Henry's allies constructed a web of shocking accusations: adultery with 5 men, incest with her own brother George Boleyn, and high treason against the king. The alleged lovers included Mark Smeaton, a low-born musician whose coerced confession under torture gave the charges a veneer of credibility, as well as powerful courtiers such as Henry Norris, Francis Weston, and William Brereton. The accusations were riddled with contradictions. Some trysts were said to have occurred when Anne was pregnant or not even present at court, yet evidence mattered little when royal will demanded conviction. The scandal electrified Europe, with the most shocking element being the suggestion that a Queen of England could stoop to relations with a court musician, crossing class boundaries in a way considered both degrading and treasonous. Anne was tried at the Tower of London in May 1536, found guilty despite her impassioned denials, and executed by sword within days. Her alleged lovers were also put to death, their names forever entwined with hers in tragedy. Anne's fall cleared the path for Henry's third marriage and reshaped the course of English history. Yet her legacy did not die with her. Her daughter Elizabeth I would rise to become one of England's greatest monarchs. Anne's story demonstrates how queens were uniquely vulnerable in patriarchal systems. Their sexuality could be weaponized as a political tool, their lives sacrificed for dynastic ambition. Her trial remains a chilling reminder of how absolute power could twist truth, destroy reputations, and use accusations of infidelity as a weapon to reshape dynasties. The stories of these queens remind us that behind the crown lay not just power, but also peril, where love, desire, and scandal could alter the fate of entire nations. Whether true or fabricated, these accusations shaped dynasties, toppled thrones, and revealed the dangerous cost of defying a patriarchal order. Even in their downfall, these women left legacies that still fascinate us centuries later. If you enjoyed uncovering these forbidden royal secrets, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more captivating history. Thanks for watching.